He was one of Australia's most wanted men, tied to organised crime, a brutal murder, and something else authorities still struggle to explain. Then, he vanished. For over a decade, he was a ghost. No fingerprints, no digital trail, no mistakes. He changed his face, his name, his life. And just when it seemed like he'd gotten away with everything, he slipped up. This is how one of Australia's most hunted fugitives, a man the underworld called the Crusher, finally came undone. Career criminal Graham Potter became Australia's most wanted man in the 2010s. His earliest mugshot could be traced back to 1976 when he was just 18 years old. A few years later, in 1981, Potter carried out the grisly murder of 19-year-old Kim Barry, whom he knew from dance classes that they took together. Potter, who was at the time a 23-year-old coal miner, ran into her at the Crown Gardens disco in Keira Street, Wollongong, while he was out for a bachelor party on February the 6th. They went back to his Corrimal apartment. It was there that Potter bashed the teen to death, reportedly after she refused his advances. He subsequently returned to the disco and the following morning used a hacksaw to remove Barry's head and fingers. A few weeks later, the severed body parts were found in a garbage bag, roughly half a mile away from her body, which was located at a mountain lookout at Jamboree. The murder shocked the country, and Potter went on to serve 15 years of a life sentence before he was released. In the 2000s, Potter became involved with the criminal underworld and began moving massive amounts of drugs, in addition to carrying out gangland assassinations. By 2010, he was wanted on federal drug charges and 2 charges of conspiracy to murder. The first case was connected to a 2008 haul of 15 million ecstasy tablets, which were smuggled in tomato cans. In the second case, he was wanted for the planned murder of 2 men on behalf of a drug syndicate over a failed importation scheme. In February of 2010, Potter skipped an appearance at Melbourne Magistrates Court and went on the run. He would remain a fugitive for more than a decade. During that time, the authorities reported that he became a master of disguise. In August of 2010, Potter was spotted on CCTV at a caravan park in Tully, south of Cairns, in far north Queensland. He'd fled by the time that the authorities reached the location, but officers found handwritten letters with to-do lists in which he discussed the need to get theatrical disguises and a fat suit. Potter also wrote that he had to learn silicone casting and printing logos for cars. Additionally, recovered from the campsite were personal items that included binoculars, knives, zip ties, and lubricant. The near-miss in Tully would become the closest that law enforcement would come to catching Potter in roughly 12 years. He went on to hide within various communities using aliases and resorting to different techniques to conceal his identity, such as donning wigs, changing his hair color, adopting costumes, or wearing multiple layers of clothing to appear heavier than he was. In January of 2011, the police offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his capture, and in August of 2017, Victoria Police Acting Assistant Crime Commissioner Paul DeSanto described Potter as the country's #1 fugitive. The police investigated a number of sighting reports before they ultimately tracked him down in February of 2022 to a ramshackle cottage in Ravenshoe, Queensland. As the police charged through the door, body cam footage showed Potter climbing down from a dilapidated bed onto metal cages and boxes stacked on the floor. He defeatedly replied, yeah, when police ordered him to put his hands up. Potter was living in squalor in a home that had empty alcohol bottles in the windows and which up until recently had been obscured from view by dense banana trees. Potter, whose disheveled appearance bore the marks of his life on the run, was handcuffed and taken to a police vehicle. He initially gave the police a fake name, but a biometric examination confirmed his identity. The rural town where he was found only had a population of about 1,000 residents, but they reported that they'd never seen Potter before. 2023 updates indicated that he'd been extradited to Melbourne, and his complex case was ongoing, as witness interviews were carried out and evidence was examined. Number 9. Antonio Riano. On December the 19th of 2004, Mexican national Antonio Riano went to the Roundhouse Bar in Hamilton, Ohio, armed with a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol. Riano, who was then in his early 40s, confronted 25-year-old Benjamin Becerra. An argument ensued which continued outside the bar, and at one point, Riano fired a shot into the ground before walking away. He then returned and exchanged more words with Becerra. A bystander tried to intervene, but Riano pointed the pistol at Becerra and shot him in the face from point point-blank range. The shooting was partially captured on surveillance cameras. Around the time that he was indicted for murder in February of 2005, Riano disappeared, leaving behind his wife and 3 children. Riano's face was broadcast on the TV show America's Most Wanted in 2005, but nearly 2 decades would pass before the man faced judgment for his crimes. In August of 2024, he was found hiding in plain sight in his hometown of Zapatitlán, Palmas, in the state of Oaxaca, Mexico. The 72-year-old fugitive had been working as a police officer, and he told local media that he wanted to help the people of Mexico. He was extradited to the US, where he was put on trial for murder in mid-June of 2025. During the legal proceedings, evidence was presented that indicted Riano had bought ammunition for his pistol less than an hour before shooting Becerra. When law enforcement searched his home in the shooting's wake, they found a trove of false identities and the Smith & Wesson with 2 bullets spent. The defense and the prosecution agreed upon the fact that Riano had shot Becerra. Riano's representatives, however, stated that he'd done so because the younger man was terrorizing him and his family, highlighting that the police had never helped him. The prosecution presented Riano as a dangerous thug who was known as El Diablo. Prosecutors noted that people were heard using the nickname multiple times in surveillance footage captured at the time of the incident, and that Riano was feared in the community. Becerra was reportedly terrified of the man, and roughly a minute before he was executed, he told his cousin, "He's got a gun, he's going to kill me," disputing the defense's notion that Riano was a victim of habitual harassment. The prosecution stated they outnumbered him. If they are terrorizing him, why not jump him? Beat the crap out of him. It's because he's El Diablo. They're scared of him. On June the 13th of 2025, Riano was found guilty of murder, and his sentencing was scheduled for July. Number 8. Marco Ebben. Leading up to February of 2025, Marco Ebben, a Dutch gangster often dubbed the cocaine king of Europe, was among Europe's most wanted criminals. At the time, the 32-year-old had managed to avoid capture for years and was coordinating his drug empire out of Mexico. Ebben, who had ties to the notorious Sinaloa cartel, was convicted in absentia in 2020 to 7 years behind bars. The charges stemmed from offenses carried out between 2013 and 2015. During that time frame, Ebben smuggled over 880 pounds of cocaine in pineapple-filled containers on a trafficking route from Brazil to the Netherlands. The man went on the run and didn't spend any time behind bars. He'd reportedly been hiding in Mexico under an assumed identity since 2023. Ebben supported the faction of Sinaloa leader Ismael El Mayo Zambada in a war with Los Chapitos. In October of 2024, Ebben took advantage of the Sinaloa infighting to fake his own death as a cartel execution in Culiacan in a bid to stop the authorities from pursuing him. There was little evidence to support the fact that he died, with the exception of a statement from an alleged girlfriend who claimed to have recognized the body. The ruse ultimately failed, and in mid-February of the following year, the authorities were reportedly prepared to arrest him. However, before they could make a move, Ebben was gunned down in the Emerald Zone of Atizapan, just outside Mexico City. Cartel rivals shot the Dutch drug trafficker 15 times, and photos emerged of his lifeless body lying in a pool of blood between 2 parked cars. Local authorities didn't immediately confirm his death, but unofficial reports on the incident seemed to indicate that Ebben had indeed been assassinated. Number 7. Francisco Javier Roman-Bardales. On February the 21st of 2025, senior MS-13 leader Francisco Javier Roman-Bardales was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, with the stipulation that he was to be considered armed and dangerous. The 47-year-old, nicknamed Veterano de Tribos, had been indicted alongside 26 other high-ranking members of the international criminal gang in the Eastern District of New York in December of 2020. Roman-Bardales faced charges that included narco-terrorism conspiracy, human smuggling, as well as conspiracy to provide and conceal material support to terrorists. Roman-Bardales was reported to have ordered and coordinated acts of violence and murder, in addition to organizing military-style training camps and acquiring military-grade weaponry. He played a crucial role in the expansion of MS-13 into Mexico. Towards that end, he forged alliances with local cartels and participated in all manner of crime that solidified the gang's position in the country and its money-making opportunities, the chief of which was drug trafficking. Members of MS-13's Mexico program were reported to have murdered some migrants bound for the US, including suspected members of the rival 18th Street Gang and MS-13 members attempting to flee the gang without permission. Nearly a month after he'd been placed on the FBI's most wanted list, Roman-Bardales was apprehended in the mountains of Veracruz, Mexico, following a coordinated effort by local and U.S. authorities. A photo taken during the arrest showed the handcuffed gangster smiling towards the camera while flanked by 2 officers from the Secretariat of Security and Civilian Protection, who had their backs turned. FBI Director Kash Patel celebrated the capture of Roman-Bardales in a statement that read, "This is a major victory both for our law enforcement partners and for a safer America." Roman-Bardales was arraigned on March the 19th of 2025. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced at the time, MS-13 is a terrorist organization, and this case reflects the Department of Justice's ironclad commitment to putting terrorists behind bars. Number 6. Matteo Messina Denaro. Mafioso Matteo Messina Denaro was at one point considered the de facto boss of all bosses within the Sicilian mafia, or Cosa Nostra. He evaded capture for 30 years, a period during which he continued to control various businesses, amassing enormous power and wealth. After ascending to a leading position in the Italian underworld, Messina Denaro was portrayed as a contrasting figure to the more conservative, family-oriented values of his contemporaries. He was described as a womanizer with an appetite for fast cars, high-brand fashion, and luxury watches. Messina Denaro controlled the province of Trapani and made his fortune through protection rackets, fraud pertaining to public construction contracts, and drug trafficking, which also brought him to the attention of the FBI. His legitimate businesses included stakes in a supermarket chain and a vast but corrupt olive oil production business. Denaro was linked to several notorious Cosa Nostra crimes. On May the 23rd of 1992, Giovanni Falcone, a leading anti-mafia prosecutor, was killed in a bomb attack in Capaci on the orders of then boss of all bosses Salvatore Riana. Over 880 pounds of explosives were placed in a culvert under the highway between Palermo International Airport and the city of Palermo, near the town of Capaci. Riana reportedly wanted to send a message by killing Falcone in Sicily. The explosives were detonated by remote control, and the blast was so powerful that it registered on local earthquake monitors. Falcone, his wife, and 3 police officers that were part of their security detail were killed. His colleague, prosecutor Paolo Borsellino, was killed 57 days later in Palermo. A bomb containing roughly 220 pounds of TNT was placed in a Fiat 126 and detonated in Via D'Amelio, killing Borsellino and 5 members of his police escort. After Falcone and Borsellino were assassinated, the government cracked down on the Cosa Nostra, resulting in the arrest of Riana in January of 1993 and the introduction of much harsher punishments for criminals with mafia ties. Messina Denaro and the remaining bosses consequently went on the offensive and initiated a campaign of domestic terrorism meant to force the Italian state to back off. Bomb attacks were launched in the Via de Giorgio Fili, Florence, in Via Palestro, Milan, in Piazza Gian Giovanni, Laterano, and in Via San Teodoro, Rome. The attacks collectively resulted in the death of 10 people, the injuring of 93 others, and damaged to cultural landmarks. Messina Denaro went on the run in the aftermath. In 2002, he was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment for the 1993 bomb attacks. In 2012, while still at large, he was one of 5 people sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Giuseppe Di Matteo. His father, Santino, had been involved in the Capaci bombing and was the first of the assassins to become a government witness. Pre-teen Giuseppe was kidnapped in November of 1993 by mobsters posing as police officers. Giuseppe was held captive for 776 days, during which he became ill due to torture and mistreatment. In January of 1996, he was fatally strangled and subsequently dissolved in acid by his captors. Messina Denaro received a 3rd life sentence in absentia in 2020 for instigating the Capaci and Via D'Amelio bombings. The mafioso's seemingly interminable wealth enabled him to avoid capture for 3 decades, in spite of the authorities repeatedly confiscating assets and shutting down businesses that were under his control. In September of 2010, police seized a record-breaking 1.5 billion euros worth of assets from Sicilian businessman Vito Nicastri, who was accused of working with Messina Denaro. The police could only identify the mobster based on a 1993 driver's license photo. Multiple sketches and renditions of his appearance, which were adapted for age, were released in the years that followed as part of bids for information regarding his whereabouts. Messina Denaro remained on the run until January of 2023. On the 15th of the month, roughly 100 police officers descended on a private clinic in Palermo, where he was receiving treatment for colon cancer under a fake name. Messina Denaro was arrested almost exactly 30 years after the arrest of Riano, whom he was suspected to have succeeded as boss of all bosses. At the time of his arrest, Messina Denaro's assets were estimated to be at least 4 billion euros, and he was known as the last godfather of the Cosa Nostra. The man who once infamously claimed, "I filled a cemetery all by myself," eventually fell in a coma and succumbed to his terminal illness in September of 2023 at the age of 61. Number 5. Zhou Kehua. On the morning of August the 10th of 2012, Chinese man Zhou Kehua carried out a violent robbery outside the Bank of China's savings office in Canjuan, Xiaopingba. Kehua shot 3 people, one of whom, a woman, succumbed to her injuries. He stole the equivalent of nearly $10,000 from the fallen victim and fled the scene. The shooting was captured on CCTV. Hours later, Kehua reportedly gunned down a police officer near Xinjiang town. After the shootings, Kehua became China's most wanted criminal, and a massive manhunt was launched across Chongqing. The pursuit became the most popular topic on Weibo, the country's internal Twitter-like social media platform. By the time that the manhunt was launched, the Ministry of Public Security had already classified Kehua as an A-level wanted criminal. He was arrested in 1993 and 1997 for illegal firearms possession. He fled China and was a mercenary soldier in Myanmar from 2002 to 2004, where he further developed his familiarity with firearms. Upon returning to China, Kehua embarked on an 8-year crime spree that resulted in him fatally shooting at least 10 people and injuring 5 others. He carried out armed robberies in Jiangsu, Henan, and Chongqing. Most of his crimes involved him targeting people who were leaving banks or withdrawing money at cash machines. Kehua became known as Bao Tuga, which translates as Mr. Headshot, and was considered ruthless and extremely dangerous. At dawn on August the 14th of 2012, after a manhunt lasting 4 days, Chongqing officers cornered him in an alleyway. Kehua, who had multiple pistols on him, was fatally shot through the head. Graphic photos that appeared on the website of the official Xinhua News showed him lying face down on the ground in a pool of blood. Number 4. Jitender Maan Gogi. Before his capture in 2020, Jitender Maan Gogi had become the most wanted man in the Indian capital of New Delhi. When he was captured in April of that year, Gogi had 19 active cases against him for offenses that included murder, attempted murder, extortion, illegal firearm possession, and land grabbing. Once a prominent student at Delhi University, Gogi dropped out in 2010 and fully immersed himself in a life of crime. He formed his own gang, which became involved in extortion rackets around the capital. Over the course of a decade, Gogi was involved in a bloody war with a gang headed by Sunil Tajpuria, also known as Tilu. The feud resulted in at least 10 deaths on both sides and other violent incidents. Gogi was arrested in 2016, but within 3 months, he was on the loose again after escaping police custody while on his way to court. In 2017, Gogi was identified as the mastermind behind the execution of singer Ashita Dahiya. The motive behind the assassination was reported to have been an arrangement between Gogi and Dahiya's brother-in-law. The latter was part of Gogi's gang, and he had reportedly forced himself on the singer and murdered her mother. In 2017, she was set to testify as part of an ongoing case against him. The singer, who specialized in Haryana folk songs, was returning to Delhi after a show at a village in Panipat in October of 2017. Assassins blocked her car before fatally shooting her in the head and neck at close range. Hers was one of at least 5 murders directly connected to Gogi. The gangster was eventually captured following a critical slip-up made by one of his closest lieutenants, Kuldeep Maan, alias Faji. He posted a photo on social media of 3 cups of Starbucks drinks marked Rohit, Gogi, and Faji. The first name was that of Rohit Moy, another of Gogi's closest associates. In light of the post, the trio was tracked down to a safe house in Gogaon and arrested. Gogi continued running his rackets while locked up through alliances forged with Indian crime figures based in Dubai. On September the 24th of 2021, Gogi was brought to the Rohini court complex for a hearing. Given his notoriety and previous escapes from custody, the gangster was accompanied by enhanced security. Nevertheless, 2 armed assassins disguised as lawyers were able to make their way through the courthouse and reach him. The duo then brandished pistols and opened fire on Gogi. The gangster was shot 6 times and later pronounced dead in a local hospital. The brazen assassination was followed by backlash, and citizens questioned the safety of New Delhi courts. Footage posted on social media in the assassination's immediate aftermath showed chaos erupting outside of the courtroom, with people fleeing and loud gunshots ringing out. The incident occurred at the time of COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, when most hearings were held virtually. and there weren't many people in the courtroom, the assassins were shot dead by the police in the moments that followed. They were subsequently identified as Rahul and Jagdeep, and they were said to have been hired by Tilu. In 2023, 4 members of Gogi's gang stabbed him over 100 times at Tihar jail. The murder, carried out with improvised awl-like weapons, was described as a bloodbath, lasting up to 20 minutes with scarce intervention from jail staff. Number 3. Song Moujiang. In 2019, reports out of China indicated that one of its most wanted criminals, who'd evaded the authorities for 17 years, had finally been captured. Song Moujiang was convicted of trafficking women and minors, but in March of 2002, he escaped from a prison camp in southwestern China's Sichuan province. He hid in a cave situated on a precarious cliff face in Yongshan, in the southern Yunnan province. All efforts to find him failed, but on September the 19th of 2019, the authorities used drones in the search after receiving leads that he could be hiding in the mountains behind his hometown of Daxing. A drone was flown over the area for 5 hours before a blue roof was spotted on the near vertical cliff. The authorities launched a search on foot and Moujiang was located. For years he'd been living in seclusion in a cave that measured a little over 20 square feet and was so small that it was impossible to stand upright once inside. Moujiang had survived by using plastic bottles to take water from streams and branches to start fires and cook his meals. He appeared underweight and disheveled. He'd managed to cut his own hair but hadn't had a proper bath or a change of clothes in a long time. 63-year-old Moujiang hadn't communicated with other people in so long that he had difficulty expressing himself. He was nevertheless able to admit his crimes and was sent back to jail. Number 2. Hakan Ayik. On November the 1st of 2023, Australian drug lord Hakan Ayik was arrested in a police raid in Istanbul after years of evading law enforcement in his native country and beyond. Footage of the arrest showed the kingpin, who was also known as Big Hux, shirtless and on his knees while surrounded by heavily armed officers. He was the most prominent of 36 people arrested by Turkish police for being involved in an international organized crime group. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, Ayik was nicknamed the Facebook Gangster for his ostentatious displays of wealth and opulence on social media. Many considered him to be the archetype of the modern gangster, from his steroid-fueled, muscle-bound physique to his boasting of expensive cars, luxury watches, designer clothes and partying in exotic destinations. By 2008, Ayik was firmly on the radar of Australian police. He owned karaoke bars and brothels in Sydney and Canberra and was suspected of being involved in drug operations amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars. Several of Ayik's high school friends went on to hold leadership positions in the Comanchero Motorcycle Club. Ayik himself wasn't reported to have been deeply entrenched in the biker lifestyle, but he did cultivate a relationship with the club that enabled him to build his drug empire. He was believed to have been among the first traffickers to use warring biker groups to work together to distribute drugs across Australia. Also instrumental in Ayik's rise to prominence was his relationship with Sam Gore, or The Company, a crime syndicate composed of multiple triads that controlled a vast portion of the Asia-Pacific drug market. Ayik's operation steadily grew from trafficking commercial drug quantities to manufacturing them by setting up drug laboratories. The Australian Federal Police and Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission examined Ayik's phone records and social media posts from 2008 to 2010 and determined that he was involved in the importation of over 440 pounds of heroin and in creating a trafficking infrastructure involving train and air freight. Media coverage in 2010 exposed Ayik as part of a technologically savvy and highly mobile modern Australian underworld that is much harder to police and is capable of amassing great wealth with relative ease. As law enforcement began arresting individuals involved with his organization, Ayik decided to cancel his plans of returning to Australia following a trip to Hong Kong. Shortly thereafter, Interpol issued a red notice for his arrest. In spite of multiple seizures of his assets, Ayik continued adding to his criminal empire and would remain on the run for 13 years. He was considered a visionary in the sense that he was part of a wave of criminals that introduced mobile secure, encrypted communication to the criminal underworld, initially through phantom secure mobile devices. The combination of Ayik's standing as an internationally successful kingpin and his adoption of technology would eventually translate to disaster for criminals on a global scale. Phantom Secure was eventually dismantled, and a vacuum was left for underworld figures seeking secure communication around that time. In the spring of 2018, a hacker who went by the pseudonym Afgu was being investigated by a San Diego branch of the FBI. Afgu was facing charges, and in exchange for a reduced sentence, they offered to develop and distribute a platform called Anom. It appeared to be a secure smartphone-based proprietary messaging app, but it was actually a Trojan horse that offered the authorities a backdoor into the communication. Hakan Ayik was regarded as someone who was trusted and was going to be able to successfully distribute this platform. He was approached by undercover agents and was instrumental in spreading Anom on the black market, unaware of its true nature. The massive operation, codenamed Trojan Shield in the US and Ironside in Australia, was headed by the FBI and the Australian Federal Police. It went on from 2018 to 2021, resulting in the collection of 27 million messages from Anom devices around the world and the arrest of over 800 people in 16 countries. They included alleged members of Australian-based Italian mafia, Albanian organized crime, outlaw motorcycle gangs, drug syndicates, and more. In total, over 40 tons of drugs were seized, along with hundreds of firearms, dozens of luxury cars, and over $48 million in various fiat and cryptocurrencies. In 2021, after it became public knowledge that Ayik was the main contributor to Anom's distribution, Australian authorities advised him to surrender for his own safety, as he'd reportedly become a marked man. Ayik was also indicted by the FBI for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act conspiracy and faced up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Regardless, the man remained on the run. Ayik altered his face through plastic surgery during his prolonged evasion of international law enforcement. Leading up to his arrest, he ran the King's Cross Hotel in Istanbul under the name Hakan Rice. He continued to coordinate massive drug trafficking operations after reportedly developing ties with the Sinaloa cartel and funneled money into the country through Turkish businesses. His November 2023 arrest was regarded as one of the most significant in Turkey's underworld history, and updates on the matter indicated that he wouldn't be extradited. His wealth had been affected through multiple seizures, but even so, at the time of his arrest, Ayik was worth anywhere between $515 million and $1.5 billion. Number 1. Redoine Faid. In the 2010s, career criminal Redoine Faid became France's most wanted man through a series of daring robberies and prison escapes. Faid was nicknamed The Writer, as he authored 2 books documenting his rise to prominence as a criminal figure in the suburbs of Paris. In the mid-1990s, when he was in his early 20s, Faid led a gang responsible for crimes that included armored truck robberies, bank robberies, jewel theft, and extortion. He spent 3 years on the run in Switzerland, Israel, and Palestine. In his autobiography, Faid wrote that during his travels, he disguised himself as an Orthodox Jew and learned Hebrew. He reportedly received training in military tactics and firearms from Israeli soldiers, and also developed contacts that would benefit him in future criminal operations. Faid was eventually arrested in 1998 and sentenced to 30 years behind bars for at least 8 armed robberies. He served 10 years and was released on parole in 2009 after convincing the authorities that he'd abandoned the gangster lifestyle. That year, Faid reportedly approached director Michael Maan at a Paris film festival and told him, "You are my technical advisor." Faid said that he obsessively watched Maan's movie Heat, starring Al Pacino opposite Robert De Niro, in order to perfect his robbing technique. In spite of his claims of being reformed, Faid was suspected of orchestrating another heist within a year of his release. In May of 2010, a cash transportation van was targeted outside of Paris by a 10-strong crew. A vehicle used by 4 of the crew members was subsequently spotted by law enforcement, and a chase ensued. During the 6-mile highway pursuit, the thugs opened the back of their van and unloaded tear gas canisters, fire extinguishers, and shot a submachine gun at police officers, injuring them and members of the public. The van eventually crashed and the armed robbers emerged, clad in ski masks, gloves, bulletproof vests, and combat gear. They immediately opened fire on a responding police vehicle, fatally injuring 26-year-old officer Aurélie Foucault. The death of the woman, who was a young mother, caused outrage across the country. Faid would eventually receive a longer sentence in connection to the incident, but in 2011 he was given an 8-year sentence for breaking his parole conditions. Faid had already amassed a cult-like reputation in the French underworld, even before he carried out his first prison break on April the 13th of 2013. That morning he held 4 guards hostage and used dynamite to blast through 5 heavy doors at the high-security Sequedin prison near Lille. The explosives had reportedly been concealed in handkerchiefs and smuggled into the facility by Faid's wife. Waiting for him in a getaway car was ex-Special Forces officer Sabri Trad. They fled the scene and torched the vehicle in Lille before switching to another car. The guards whom Faid had used as human shields were not harmed, but they were described as traumatized in the incident's wake. That day, a Europe-wide warrant was released, and within 6 weeks, on May the 29th of 2013, Faid was arrested at a B&B in Ponto Combo. He was reportedly trying to obtain documents and flee to Israel. He had 10 years added to his sentence for the jailbreak, and following a failed appeal in April of 2018 was given another 25 years for masterminding the robbery that killed Foucault. On July the 1st of 2018, Faid broke out of a penitentiary in Ro, in the capital's southeastern suburbs. His armed accomplices, described by law enforcement as an elite commando unit, hijacked an Aerospatiale Alouette helicopter by posing as flight students. The pilot, Stefan Bay, was held at gunpoint by the men in order to land in an area of the prison courtyard that was not equipped with anti-aircraft netting. Guards didn't open fire, fearing for the safety of the pilot and of causing the helicopter to crash. Faid's accomplices were suspected of having scouted the prison with drones beforehand. The Brazian extraction lasted less than 10 minutes. At least one member of the commando unit remained behind to guard the helicopter and its pilot, while 2 others forced their way into the prison visitation room where 46-year-old Faid was talking to his brother. The commanders, who were armed with Kalashnikov rifles, used angle grinders and smoke bombs to overcome prison guards and assisted Faid as he made his way to the helicopter. Cell phone video captured by inmates inside the prison showed the helicopter flying away, and cheering could be heard in the background. The helicopter was later abandoned in Gage-les-Gonesse, a northeastern suburb of Paris located about 37 miles from the prison. Bay was freed by the hijackers and found unharmed, but in a state of shock. Faid made his escape with a vehicle that was later found torched at Au Paris Nord shopping mall. In light of the prison escape, Faid's infamy grew to gargantuan proportions, and he once again became France's most wanted man. The authorities warned that beyond his charisma and aura, beyond the folklore, Faid is a dangerous individual. The ensuing manhunt was primarily focused domestically, and roughly 3,000 officers were dispatched across the country. 3 weeks after his escape, Faid narrowly avoided capture after law enforcement spotted him at a service station near Paris. He and an accomplice were able to escape, and their vehicle was later found in a parking garage with plastic explosives inside. On October the 3rd of 2018, Faid was arrested at a residence in the town of Creil, north of Paris, along with his brother and 2 other men. The combined prison time amassed through his robberies and prison escapes meant that Faid was to remain behind bars at least until 2060. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be hunted down by multiple agencies on an Interpol red notice or by a drug cartel? Let us know in the comments section below.